Greetings. Welcome to the Dragon Con Urban Fantasy Track winter panels that we are doing some extra things that we didn't get to do during con. And we have been able to feature some programming that we would have done if we'd been in person, but the virtual con did not allow us time for. And we're very pleased to be able to talk about Ragnarok today. And we hope that anyone who watches this will either, if you're watching it live with us, feel free to throw in a question or a comment. If you are watching it later, you may do so during, in the comments section, either on the Facebook link, Twitter link, or on the YouTube channel itself. So I want to, first off, have my wonderful panelists introduce themselves today. Thank you to everyone for joining us. I did have to have it pointed out to me that this was Super Bowl Sunday. When I picked this date, it was, and it was a month ago, and I was asked to do a Sunday, and I didn't really want to do Valentine's Day for other obvious reasons, and Super Bowl Sunday wasn't on my radar at the time. But in any case, I do appreciate anyone who is watching live with us, as well as my wonderful panelists who have joined us today. And Tina, we'll begin with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina Glasneck. I'm a USA Today bestselling author, and I love writing about Norse mythology. I particularly have something for Loki. So anything with Norse gods is just going to be, this is my thing. This is my jam. And before the panel started today, I made sure to watch the last episode one more time. So we're up to date. We're ready to go.
All right. There you go. Kelly.
I'm Kelly Harkins. I am the director of the American Science Fiction Fantasy Media Track. So I have, being of Scandinavian background, I have a deep fondness for this stuff. I have family still in Norway. So when I heard about this show, I was like, oh my God, I got to watch it. So, and I have so many things that are like, ooh, and I just rewatched the series too. So I got it all fresh in my brain. So.
Good. And I've got, of course, the Notebook. Okay. Marx?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm Marx Pyle. I'm a filmmaker, podcaster, nonfiction author, occasional adjunct professor, which recently got his MFA. Woohoo. So that's been a fun adventure. And and my first book, an urban fantasy series, will premiere this year. And I love stories using Norse mythology. Everybody uses Greek, so I love it when they pull in Norse mythology, and really enjoyed the series. So,
yeah.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hi, my name is Lisa Manifold. I'm a USA Today bestseller who writes urban fantasy, paranormal, and like the tiniest little smidge of space opera and sci-fi. And I'm actually guilty of what Marx was talking about with using Greek mythology. Like my latest book, it is my latest book pulls on the Oracle of Delphi. But I love Thor. I love Thor. So when I saw this show, I was like, yay! Because I like seeing the various interpretations of Norse mythology. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure. And Davior.
Hello, everyone. This is Daviar Snipes. I'm an actor, predominantly on stage. I also do film and voiceover work. And this is one of those shows that I found through the beauty of YouTube or Netflix rabbit holes. And I found this is one of these international gems because, again, yes, Norse mythology and just great storylines and character study pieces, and just kind of decided I would take a chance and found this magical show. So I'm really happy to talk about it.
Well, I'm very happy that you're willing to talk about it, especially on this day, at this point in time.
Challenging Super Bowl Sunday, yes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So now we know who was the one who thankfully pointed it out to me. So we did change the time, and that worked out fine, hopefully for everyone. Since I thought, hey, well, maybe people might want to watch this instead of, there aren't supposed to be a whole lot of parties this year. So hopefully that will, this will serve as a nice substitute. And my first question for you guys is, that one of the things that struck me so much about the show, especially on the second watching of it, was how well they blended fantasy and, with real life concerns. And that, it's some of it is visual, where you get this gorgeous scenery juxtaposed with these environmental catastrophes. But that blending of those two elements, to me, really helped underpin the just the whole story for me. And I wanted to just find out, how did you feel about that? Did it work for you? Did it not? And Tina, we'll start with you.
Well, I love the scenery. I mean, it was absolutely breathtaking. I wish that I lived there, to be quite honest. It was just so beautiful. But I think for me, especially since they called it Ragnarok, it was also to dig into the actual original myth of Ragnarok. And part of that includes the folklore of an epic volcanic eruption that actually clouded the sky for 3 years. And so people felt like the world was ending. And so to know that the original myth had or dealt with climate change or dealt with natural disaster, that they were able to pull that into the show, I thought, wow, okay, these people are really, they're making sure that you understand not only Norse myth, but also the concerns that we have today. I loved it.
Okay. Kelly.
Well, I know that some of the criticism of the show brought up that they thought it was climate change fiction and things like that. But there's definitely, with the way Norway is placed in the world, it sees such extremes. And I think it really deals with that more than a lot of it, between being coastline, having so many glaciers. And it sees a very physical difference in that, on it. I don't want to say day-to-day basis, but enough of a basis net that I think it's easier for them to take in than maybe some of us, in the United States. We don't see that quite as viscerally as they do. So I think it makes sense, especially when you take the mythology and moving it forward, kind of how it would evolve and going from there.
Yeah, if you have a glacier essentially in your backyard, it's a little easier to tell when it's melting than it is for us, or for much of the world. Marx.
Yeah, I think it works really well for the show. When I first saw the trailer, for whatever reason, I thought like, oh, it's like Thor Smallville. But then you watch, it's very different. And one of the things that make it very different is that environmental aspect that's very real in our world, especially besides climate change. It's really heavy about water and, what Flint and other things we've had in our country, other countries. It's very relatable. So yeah, I think that worked really well for it, to make the bad guys tied into that and tie that into the Ragnarok. I thought it was a great choice.
Great. Lisa.
So since I write urban fantasy, I look at a lot of these things through the lens of how do they blend the fantasy with day-to-day life, because that's one of the things that I love about urban fantasy. I think they did a really good job with this. And one of the things that I really loved, I loved the bad guys. I loved that the frost giants have evolved from, whatever their concerns were 1,000 years ago, to how would they go about being the frost giants in 2020, 2021, and what's one thing that people don't necessarily pay attention to? Climate change is very politicized. People either ignore it or they're all for it. So to me, this was a perfect way for them to slide in. How are the bad guys doing all the bad things? I loved that. And like Tina, I loved the scenery. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it's gorgeous to look at. It's just like every once in a while, you want to freeze one of the frames and you're like, oh.
Yes.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, there is so much talk now. I mean, I think we all love the modern concept of when you take a superhero show or a mythological figure and you put it into the real world with something that's actually contextual, that we all identify with, and that is all relatable to us. And to make it that, if you're talking about a figure whose mission was to protect the earth, then you're giving him a real life thing that he's protecting the earth from, which is truly the earth's devastation, which is climate change. And to bring that into such a real world element, I think it gave the show such a gravity and such a weight that, to counter Mark's point of about it, that takes it away from being Thor Smallville, because now we've got something that's very real world and much more tangible that the show kind of sits on. That's an actual threat that we're all kind of invested in and are following. And I think that was so smart. And to me, everyone's talking about the scenery from the opening shot of the first episode, where it's this gorgeous kind of scale shot of just the mountains and just the water. And it's like, oh, this is what our hero is here to protect. He's literally here to protect this, because this is what's in danger. And I just thought bringing that in gave such a foundation to the show.
Well, and that's a really good point, that it does make it seem as though he has something very concrete to be doing, and not just this kind of, I don't know, somewhat nebulous idea of I'm protecting the world from evil. I'm actually protecting this place from what these people are doing. And so I thought that was a good, a good way of going about that. Now, which character did you find, or were you most intrigued by, or did you enjoy watching the most, and why? And Kelly, we'll start with you this time.
I would have to say, after just doing the rewatch, I'm usually, the sucker for the hero, but I have to think that in the end, Gree was the one I kind of connected with, because here she's pulled both ways. She's dealing with her father. She's dealing with her attraction to Fior. She's also interested. So I think that tug of war is what really drew me to her. And I think we get pulled so many different ways, that, her trying to figure that out, and that puzzle, and trying to fit in with the popular girls, and a lot of that thing, I really resonated with me on that. And I definitely see there's a lot more to that story, considering I'm sure we're going to talk about the ending, how that kind of was left. There's obviously so much more there to go. So
Marx.
I like to agree too, but Magne, not sure if I pronounced the name correctly, but and I did enjoy his season. What I thought was really interesting about him versus like a typical superhero story is that he was very open about trying to tell people he had powers, and
exactly,
and then they didn't believe him, which was really heartbreaking for him. And then him trying to deal with trying to be this hero, but then seeing how it affects his mom, and trying to be a good son, and torn in these different directions, I thought was an interesting choice that you don't see very much in urban fantasy or superhero type stories. So, and love hammer action.
Oh yeah, that was when he threw that hammer, and then we find out in the next episode what happened to it. Yeah, that was interesting. Lisa.
So it's a toss-up for me. I definitely like Magni, and one of the things that I liked about him, something that Mark said really hits. I like that he tried to tell everyone what was, his powers. But interestingly enough, if you all have read Outlander, she talks about how if you made a lot of noise that you were a time traveler, they'd throw you in the loony bin, and that would be it. And it's the same kind of thing that's happening to him. Like, they figure, oh, you can't have any powers. Something has to be wrong. We have to diagnose you. You have to be on medication. Something has to happen. So I found that both fascinating and heartbreaking. But I also love Fior. You know why? Oh God, I'm going to expose myself. He reminds me. I am a huge Draco Malfoy fan fiction person. Like, I love
the bad boy.
Oh my God! And that is what Fior makes me think of, is like the Draco Malfoy in fan fiction, not the Draco Malfoy that you saw in the books or the Draco Malfoy that you saw in the movies, but the fanfic Draco. And if any of you are fanfic people, you know what I'm talking about. So it was, and if you don't, you're like, okay, crazy lady. But it was a mixture between the two, because I found both of them really, I wanted to know more about them.
Okay. Devior.
Well, I'm right there with the crazy lady. I mean, no, Lisa, I love you. No. Honestly, it's not with Fior, but it's with Magna, and exactly what you said. It's the fact that he has so much power, but through much of the show is so powerless because no one believes him, and he's kind of on his own. He is such the outcast. And it's very rare that in a show like that, where the most powerful person is put in a position where he is at such a loss at times, where his mother is fighting against him. The whole town is against him. Everyone wants to put him in this box to be medicated, kicked out of school. So that gave me such an empathy for him, because it really connected me to this journey. Because what if you're that person that is the one person trying to do the right thing, and no one is there to listen to you, and you have all this power to do something, but what do you do with that? Because he's still spending so much time trying to figure out who he is and what his purpose is. That really connected me on his journey, and made him the main character for me to really connect to.
Also, he can't even get the girl. Like
Mhm.
the
Yes.
girl,
Yes.
he can't even get the. We're not sure whether he's going to get the girl.
Yeah, and then, but I actually enjoyed the relationship that they do have. I think I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for, rather than a romantic relationship, because those are always going to turn up. But the ones that can be between people of opposite sex that they are just friendships. I really enjoyed those when they're done well, and I think they're doing a good job with them, with Magna and Gree for that. Tina.
I actually connected most with Magna's mother, Tira. And one thing that I noticed is that, she's a single parent. We know that her husband has passed away, and she's just trying to survive. And she's trying to get her kids to survive. And the whole thing about it is that, at least, and this is my interpretation, mothers will protect you, even if it means calling you crazy, because they want to protect you from what society has, or the box that society might put you in. And so we don't know what she experienced with her husband, Magna's father. Some things are implied there.
Yes.
Especially when the end battle with what Vidar says, some things are implied. So more than likely, there's a lot that she knows, and she's just not saying anything. She's just trying to survive, to get these kids to 18 and to survive. Although Magna is so, I do like him as a character. I kept wondering, for part of it, if we were talking about Thor's sons from Norse mythology in the beginning, or if he was a reincarnation of Thor, because they were talking about every 1,000 years, there's a new Thor, or a new reincarnation of him. And so, although I do like Magna, and I see his hero's journey and how he's changing and growing into who he is and figuring it out, I think that his mother is sooner or later going to have to jump on board for him to actually be able to embrace all of it.
Do you think that, I have to ask this, do you think that she knows and she's hoping for the best? Because I kind of got, you don't think, I don't know, I wonder.
No, I don't think so.
We're divided, yeah.
I think
we're split.
She's trying to maybe protect him from it. Like, she knows what's on that other side. And so she's trying to protect him by saying, oh, well, yeah, let's get you to the doctor. Let's medicate you so you don't have these voices in your head. Oh, that hammer that you have, that used to belong to your father, but you're not going to touch it. So those kind of things, like, yeah.
Well, there was that exchange between she and Wencha in the store, and where Wencha was like, don't worry about the darkness, the light is coming. And Turin's reaction is, what are you talking about? What kind of world do you live in? I live in the real world. So, at the time, her reaction seems, it does kind of, give a little bit of weight to what you got, or, kind of tipping in that direction. Maybe she does know there is something else, even if she's not.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And, just because that was an extreme reaction, rather than just like most of us would just stand there and say, what? Or what, that we wouldn't have had that have had that quite, quite as snappy, I guess, a reaction. But at the same time, she had just had that was when she was buying all her junk food. So she had just had a bad moment with Magna. So,
well, hey, Kelly, you had something. I didn't want to jump in front of you.
No, I was just thinking about that in that sense, that maybe because the hammer they said was his grandfather's, because that was the house they live in. And then they mentioned about, of course, at the end with Vidar talking about his father, that maybe this is just a bloodline. But there are things that she's just chooses to be obtuse about. So that's where I'm like, maybe it's a denial of emotional instability. You know, I married a nuts guy, you know, and that's kind of my kids make nuts, you know. So whether it's supernatural awareness, I don't think that's the case, but that's my opinion.
I thought more it was that she knew things weren't entirely kosher with her husband, and he died so young, and she doesn't want that to happen to her kids. Like, that's more where I was coming from. Like, maybe it didn't work out for her husband from her point of view, and so she doesn't want to see the same thing happen to her kids.
Yeah, like for me, the clues are there that she definitely knows something, because clearly, from my perspective, there's clearly the relationship there between her and Vidar, and Carol, you pointed out a brilliant point of how she reacted in the grocery store, and I think, and the way she focuses on Magna, it's so specific, because it's not like Loki is over here like the model poster child. So like her focus is not on him; it's always on Magna. And also, I think there is something to her eating, almost like it's so trauma based. Like she's seen something, she's experienced something that she's trying to deal with in the best way, and sometimes just this overeating and this overprotection of her son maybe is a result of that. But the clues are there that she's in this in some way that hasn't been shown as to this point,
and she's trying to do that too with him. Like at the end scene where they're eating their ice cream, you know, she's trying to get him to enjoy the ice cream, just like she would enjoy the chocolate and the snacks and everything to get over the drama. She's trying to ease him over into that path of, oh, everything's going to be all right. Eat your ice cream.
Eat your feelings,
I want to add one more thing since we're talking about Turd. Is I don't know about you guys, but obviously, to me, Lawrence is Vidar's kid.
Yeah,
don't you guys think so?
Yeah.
And he's such a Loki. Absolutely. You know,
yes,
Sandy.
Yes,
absolutely.
Totally.
So to me, that's the whole, their marriage was failing. She has the affair with Vidar. You know, she has another kid. And of course, that could very easily be what causes the blow up and ends up getting, you know, Magnus' father killed. So,
yeah, 100%. 100%.
With the cross dressing at the end, you could totally tell. I was like, okay, yeah, we know you. We knew
you so Loki.
Yeah, that was good. That was always good. That when he came out, especially when that shot where he's walking out to the, you know, to give the speech and they don't show his face. You just see somebody walking up, but everybody's kind of snickering, so you know that it's, you know, something kind of wild. And as soon as he said, and he's in the beauty parlor and says he wants to go blonde, that was pretty funny. But, for some reason, I was thinking that Lawrence was the older brother.
No, he says he's younger. He says Magna was held back a few years and he jumped ahead a few years.
Okay, so they're not that far apart in age, but he's okay. All right. Well, now that we've somebody mentioned Vidar, that's actually a good segue into my next question, which is that something that comes up in just about every episode, which granted there are only 6, but throughout the season of this show, and do they pack a lot of stuff in 6 episodes or what?
Yes, they do.
But the Utils, they look down on humans and their feelings. They're always making comments about this. And yet at the same time, they exhibit very strong emotions themselves. Now, do you feel as though that is something that's intrinsic in their nature as giants? Or do you think that this is something that they're kind of absorbing, masquerading as humans? Because they do it even when they're not like activated by whatever their metal music is that gets them going. Just also kind of funny, I think. But anyway, Marx, we'll begin with you this time.
I mean, well, first, I like that they're using the giants, because giants in Norse mythology and in Greek, there's a lot of giant lore, and they're not used very often. So I'm glad that they're using them. Yeah, I think they have this older school, like kill kind of thing, and warrior type code. I think it is cool. It adds more dimension that one of them is starting to feel more human, wants to be a better person. And I think even Saxa, to a certain extent, kind of wanted that in some ways too, but because she some of them. So, but yeah, I think they're learning from humans, and they're shifting their goals based on the times, and but it has changed them a little bit, being exposed to them. But they still feel they're superior, right? They still have this God complex.
Right.
So, but
Yeah, we used to be gods. That's what Sachs is always
yeah,
saying.
it's like in Supernatural, except these are a little more powerful.
Right. Just a tad. They're pretty tough. Lisa.
So I think that they'll never, like, to me, they will never lose that superiority idea, because that would be really damaging to who they are. But I think it's like anybody else. When you go and you are around people that maybe you don't appreciate, or think less of, or think a certain way of, and then you live among them, it changes your viewpoint. So I think they're changing even though they don't want to. Like with Saxons, we used to be gods. Like, to me, that's like the lady doth protest too much. Like, I feel like she, even though sometimes she just needs a smack upside the head. But at the same time, I think that she struggles, as they all do, maybe a little bit less with Vidal, but with the idea that there's more that they could be, and that goes against everything that they have thought and understood and lived with and operated under for thousands of years. So for me, that's part of their struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in the case of Saxa, she brings up to Fior that, well, I had to push Gree away, in that whole incident in the diner, and she was my best friend or something like that. And did you think I enjoyed that? And his comment is, well, you've never cared about anybody, ever. And so that was kind of an interesting point there too. I thought that she kind of showed a little more vulnerability than what she typically does. Devior.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with the notion that you cannot live amongst people for years, centuries, and then not have that affect who you are. And I think from a dramatic concept, I think the more interesting thing is to see these giants struggle with trying to hold on to who they were versus who they are now being forced to become by nature of living in society with human beings. Because as we see, they have a purpose, they have function, they have careers and status in the community. So that means, and they clearly have relationships with people. I mean, they are going to school with other students and having parties with them. So it is just natural that is going to make them more human. And I think that is their conflict that is going to be interesting to see, and how do they balance that with trying to maintain a status that is no longer there. And also, it's hard to maintain a status when you don't have a foe. Because how can you be the giants of old where there are no gods to fight against you anymore? So something to also further make you human. So maybe the emergence of Thor kind of opens the door for them to become more separate and go back to more of what they were. And maybe that'll be something we see.
Sorry, it was me.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so in some ways they may be, almost glad that he showed up, right?
It gives them purpose. I mean, it gives me, that's their purpose, is to battle the gods. And when there is no God, then what is your definition? What is your mission in existence? So yes, him being there kind of it is a blessing for them.
Tina.
Well, I like to look at the symbolism of it. We have melting glaciers. We have melting frost giants. The longer you're around someone, parts of them are going to melt onto you, and you're going to become intertwined and learn from each other. There's going to be this, it's kind of like DNA. You cannot go into a room and not leave a part of you behind. And so it's the same thing that they are encountering. They are in this world, they've been there for centuries. And although they remember, the beauty of what it was like to be gods, as they say, and cause such chaos, like Devor said, that there's something about that external purpose that they're given by having an actual enemy to fight versus having an entire society that just lays at their feet. Before Thor came, everyone was just like, oh, yeah, you guys can do whatever you want. This is our place. And now, they're having problems. They're getting into trouble with the cops. They're getting into trouble with the parents. I'm sure Rand is going to get in trouble as soon as parents find out that she was, having fun times with the students. They're breaking all of these rules that they never had to think about before. And so I like to think of it as, that iceberg is melting. And so that's a problem for a frost giant, for sure.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
It is.
Yeah. Kelly.
You stole my metaphor.
she's the writer. You got to get in there. Yeah,
absolutely. I saw it very much as the glaciers melting and receding, a kind of vibe there. There are ice giants. Absolutely. I do think it goes a little back further because we clearly see, especially around teasing Vidar about his affection for Torrid and things like that. So I think this is going back a lot further than that. But, glaciers recede, they grow, that's part of that ebb and flow. So to me, that is part of what we're seeing. And yes, absolutely. But I do think even though we're seeing the active hero in Magna, I think we can't ignore the fact that we have Odin and Frigg essentially in the town anyway.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they're there. They've been watching and, waiting to, as they even say, activate the hero, essentially, so that they are still there and they're still a presence. So I think there is some melting. I think Fjord's a big indication of that further. But I also see that kind of progression in some of these other aspects from the past. But Fiore even makes the comment when they find the barrels and he's confronted about it. He's like, that's what we did in 1967. And you can kind of see that that's, that whole kind of evolution of things, how it's kind of grown and changed and their reaction to things and how they are much more. And I think also our world being more accessible, social media and all this stuff, it exposes so much more. They're getting exposed a lot more than they would have normally. And I think that's further causing that degradation. And they probably think of it that way. So I think that's where part of that comes from.
Yeah, there was that scene with Rand where she's in her milk bath. And when Vidar comes in and she's telling him to, take it easy and stand back and not attack right away or whatever. And he says, well, you sound just like a politician. And she says, well, I've adjusted with the times, and so that was kind of an interesting comment too. And just something that I thought was kind of funny. It may have even been in that same episode where, when Vidar is all upset with Fjord, he's like, well, we used to do this and we used to do that. And then Fjord says, yeah, and now you drive a Volvo. And watch American TV and eat candy, or you like to sit on your couch and, so he's much more willing to, aside from, the whole girlfriend thing, but I mean, he's much more willing to realize, some of the differences that they have. Now,
Kelly brings up a really good point too that I love about any of these supernatural shows. But this is an urban fantasy show. How do you hide the supernatural, the magical, the God in a world that is so much more accessible? I mean, social media. I write about that. I don't know if Tina does or not, but I write about that in my books. Like, how do you hide someone who is a witch or a god or a mage or whatever? And I think they struggle with that as well. So how do you hide? You blend in and look more like what it is you're hiding amongst.
And convince people that magic isn't real.
Yes.
Right. Somehow. Yeah. Yeah. Or like Saxa pretending she doesn't know how to throw the lance when they're doing, or whatever it was that you're doing in PE. Now, one of the themes throughout the show also is about, that we hear about the chaos and the balance, and that the gods and the giants were both necessary in order to keep that balance. You couldn't have it all just one way. And apparently, now things are tipping too much in into the area of the giants doing what they want, being unchecked. And how do you think that particular theme is handled throughout the narrative, throughout the, like some of the characters? What are some of the aspects of that particular theme that strike you the most within the show? And Lisa, we'll begin with you.
So this kind of goes back to the idea, like I love the idea that Magnet is Thor's son or maybe Thor's grandson. Like I can't tell.
Right.
I see like where it could be both, but that to me shows that there is like in this universe, in this world, it's okay if the scales do this. And right now the scales are like this because the giants are really chaotic and they haven't had Thor. And this goes back to what Tina says. They haven't had a focused enemy, a focused foe, because where's Thor been? They don't know. So I like how they're exploring that, because when you don't have a continuous person or a continuous line, of course things are going to be chaotic. And the giants, at least as far as we know, have been continuous. So they don't have any kind of broken bloodline or broken hero. I like that. It creates more conflict, which I like to see.
Okay. Devior.
Well, for me, this is where I think the show, I think one of the smartest aspects of the show really comes into play. And also maybe one of the most political aspects of the show, because I think I see so much of the giants being representative of corporations and entities that are contributing to the downfall of the normal society. And I think, and I don't know how intentional that is and what the writing is, but just looking at all that we're experiencing now, just as a society, it's like so much of that feels relevant in the show, where it's the unbalanced check of the giants. In this case, ice giants, or you can compare it to major corporations that are contributing to climate change or what that may be, or the socioeconomic imbalance. Like the imbalance of the giants is what's leading to the further marginalization of normal communities and of normal folk. So hence, now being the time where the hero must emerge. So I kind of like how it's presented in the show, because again, it gives substance to why this is happening now and why this is necessary for Thor to be awakened now to combat this.
Okay. Tina.
A hero can't rise without a challenge. There has to be something that is pressing them to change, not only an external opposition, but also internally. And so what we're having here is to remember that Ragnarok itself, it means the twilight of the gods. It means, there's a cycle of change where it goes from chaos to order and around for these different cycles throughout history. And so when it comes to what's happening with the giants in this, I think that we have to look at how, my gosh, I'm losing my thread here. Sorry. We have to look at how can the giants then take the change that they're experiencing, and how can they take that and create then this power play? So we know that they have the external focus of now individuals are coming against them and saying, we're evil. This is something that they have to deal with. But internally, they're now having to deal with are we evil? They're having to ask these questions of themselves. They have to then move to having that outside force of, what is her name? Greer. Yeah, Greer come in and say, hey, you could be a better person. And him thinking, hey, maybe I can be a better person. So, but for change to happen, there has to be that outside force that's pushing it. And so be it for environmental change, that's going to have to be the activist. The humanity is going to rise and say, hey, no, you can't poison us. And so it's that constant change, that cycle of chaos versus order. And it's just bouncing back and forth.
Okay. Kelly.
This show has, as we've commented on a couple of instances, the metaphors that they use in the show are awesome. And I when you brought up like the giants and the corporations, we've all heard in our lives about giant corporations that are too big to fail, to fail. And here they make a very strong case about how if it wasn't for Util Industries, that this town would be dead.
Yeah.
And here you're making a choice, and you could see, whether it's the mayor or the police chief, or, they're all very implicit in their, knowing that there's something not quite right, but in denial. So that if this ever comes to light, this could be it could kill the town essentially, or leave everybody out of work, or et cetera, and all that kind of vibe that goes there. And they kind of bring that into that aspect of, choices and balance, and where do you draw the lines? And of course, Isolde is the one who's like, yeah, no, this line here, we crossed it already. And I think that's a strong component. But when I did the rewatch, I really noted the quote at the very end that Winche kind of brings in about, everybody thinks Ragnarok is the ending. And she says it's the beginning, which I thought was really an interesting way to look at, because most Norse mythology ends with Ragnarok. So I think that was an interesting kind of way to lead into this is not exactly the Ragnarok you think it is. So.
Yeah, right. This might be Ragnarok 2 rather than, or not the only Ragnarok or whatever. The other one was Ragnarok Light. This is the new one. Marx.
Yeah. So that last line I loved because it has a cycle aspect to it, and I know in the Thor comic books they've done some reincarnation, like they killed off all the gods and then they came back. We had Kid Loki for a while and stuff like that. I do like that they're kind of making the cycle of chaos versus, or good or evil, or chaos versus order. And even like in like those beginning definitions in the beginning of each episode, they had like the chaos monsters and stuff like that. But to echo some other points, I think making them giants who are big business and having that complexity in how, there are good things with business, but also we have these side effects, do you end progress, or do you, how's that work? And I think that makes it a lot more nuanced story. And bad guys, like if they were just like, we're going to build a frost machine and freeze the earth, you're kind of like, yeah, okay.
Necessary evils.
But making it this way makes it more relatable and more complex story. And I do appreciate that. And I'm just really curious to see what they're going to do. Like, are there other gods going to pop up now? I don't know if we're going to mention it, but that one woman, is it Iman?
Iman, yes.
Yeah, she's something, right? I'm pretty sure. And and how that's going to relate. And does Vidar die? And does that mean there's a power vector? Are there more giants? I'm really curious to see where they go with it.
Well, I got to tell you, that is a perfect segue into my next question, which is
love a good segue.
And when we did not plan this ahead of time, but thank you, Mark. Which characters or situation are you hoping that we will get more backstory on, or that will be more further explained in the next season? And Davior, you're up first this time.
Oh, really? Okay. I got to go with Ron. Is it Ran? The wife, the mom. She appears to be clearly like the most powerful within the family, and I think the actress is just phenomenal in the part, and just how she carries herself and just her physical presence, all of it. I mean, like there's literally scenes where she's like towering over people. So just the perfect casting in that part. And I can't wait to see where they take her and how much she expands, because she, to me, feels like she is designed to be the true villain of all of this, that she is the true orchestrator of the person that Magna will truly have to face. It's not going to be Vidar. It's going to be her, because I think there's a lot of symbolism in her being the principal of the school. I think there is a weight that she carries that I want to see fleshed out more, and I look forward to seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, great. That's a really good point too, about her being the principal. That would make sense for her to be the most powerful. Tina.
I'm going to go back to Torrid, I think is her name, how you pronounce it, Magna's mother. I want to know the backstory. I want to know if she really had a relationship with Vidar. I want to know why she's acting the way she is. But I also hope that they express a little bit more about the order versus the chaos, because it's not good versus evil. That's the great thing with Norse mythology. The gods, they do a lot of bad stuff.
Yes, they do.
And
the gods always do.
And the giants, they're not necessarily evil in themselves. So it'll be interesting to see how they continue that balance as well. But one other thing is that for Rand, because she is the principal, I'll be interesting to see if they bring her over to the order side, because you constantly have female giants who then come over to become more associated with the gods, like Skadi. And so that'll be very interesting to see as well.
Okay. Kelly.
Well, I'm sure by the end of when we go through everybody, I'm going to want to say all of the above.
Right, probably, yeah.
But we've talked about the whole story with Lawrence. I'm definitely curious to see whether that really is the case. I think they telegraphed it pretty clearly, but until it's, right down there, that's part of it. I am so curious about, exactly how the mechanism of the Utal family actually works. It's like the children and parents and children. I'm like, I want to know more about that too. And I think there's a lot of possibilities, kind of running with the metaphor of the Aesir of, the Norse mythology, kind of bringing in, that side of things. I think there's a lot they can do with that. And I'm curious to see whether they do that, because I see possibilities there. So.
Yeah, well, one of the things, that I don't know that I caught it the first time I watched it, but I certainly did this time, was when you were talking about the Utal family and that whole dynamic, and the fact that in one of their conversations, Fior was talking about some council. Now, this was something from, like 1,000 years ago or whatever, and that apparently Vidar wasn't on it because at the time he was a child. And yet Fior wasn't. And yet Vidar, when he's beating the snot out of Fior in that one of those first couple episodes, that he was upset at him. You are my successor, or you will be my successor, this kind of thing. So it's a really convoluted kind of relationship there. So I agree with you. I want to learn more about that as well. Marx.
Yeah, I agree. The relationship between all the giants, because what you're talking about, like you're too young, that threw me. I was like, wait a minute, who's what age, what now?
right, yeah.
So I am very interested to learn a little bit more about that, and if they're the only giants are still alive. Because we don't know for sure, right? They're only the fifth richest.
Two
family.
people aren't a council.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do agree that Rand, I would say, is probably the most dangerous, because of raw power, and also just she's a lot more clever. Vidar is always like, just kill him, he's always running.
That's his first reaction to everything.
Yeah. I think I'm curious about Magnus' brother, if he is really Loki or not, and how that's going to play out. It seems like if there was any doubt when they had the dancing scene, when the crazy old school music kicks in and stuff, and they act bizarre, I think that's a pretty big clue right there. And how that affects their relationship and such. I'm really curious about how that comes to play, and then also Iman and what she really is, or how's that involved, if she's going to be an ally or not, or something else. Because there's 9 worlds, right? In Norse mythology, there's elves and dwarves and all sorts of stuff. So.
Yeah, well, especially, they had to bring her in, and when they made a point of adding her, in the classroom, when they introduced her, and not just, oh, we have a new student, but they made a point of saying what her name was, and that teacher who couldn't get her name right or whatever, and when she came and sat down next to Magna out at the field, and he said something about, you won't be very popular, sitting next to me, and she says, well, maybe you'll be more popular sitting next to me, or she's kind of joking around with him. But she does say something to him about, well, he was talking about, well, the way things are around here, and she said, well, we'll just have to change that, won't we? And so, yeah, there's something going on with her, and she's another character that I felt that has quite a presence to her. When she, comes in to her room, you always notice her. Lisa.
This is the hard part about being the last one in this circle, because you're like, oh yeah. I've always thought that Ron was the more dangerous of the two, but I agree with Kelly. How did the hierarchy go between who got to be the parents and who got to be the kids? Like, how did that roll? Because weren't they all supposed to be sort of equal, or I don't know. So that's interesting. But I'm with Tina on this one. I really want to know what's going to happen with Turd, because what I see with Turd is a time bomb. Like, I think she knows more, or she's forgotten more, or she's like blocking what happened with Magnus' father. And I also think I agree that Loritz is Vidar's son, and that's going to come out. I wonder if Loritz knows just by the stinky way that he acts all the time, or if that's just who he is. So I don't know. Like, I could go either way on that one. But I feel like when the truth comes out from Turd, it is going to be a huge bomb, because if this is the hero's journey, how is this going to affect what happens with Magni and how he goes about everything else that he's doing? Like, there's a lot of little bombs in this, I think, but she, to me, is the big bomb.
Just something else that's very interesting about Turd is because she's eating all the junk food. Thor's wife was the goddess of like wheat. And so we're looking at grain, whole foods, organic kind of stuff. So this is a stretch here, but if she's eating like all the junk food to get as far away from that whole God side, to get as far away from the magic and everything, because by eating the sugar, that puts her more in that balance and that chaos. So she's not feeling the God side.
That's very Easter eggy.
It is.
You know what? I'm all about that.
Chemicals and junk food. Lots of
Because there's a reason why she's, because they focus on it intentionally for it not to mean nothing. Yeah.
True, and the water's poisoning the fish, and the junk food poisons the people. So
yeah. Wow.
Good point.
And Lawrence is the one who refers to her, her when she gets in one of her moods where where he calls it spiraling. He says, she's spiraling again. Now, and I have to say that I'm a big fan of the Lawrence character, and I'm not exactly sure why, except that because I think we don't know enough about him yet. But one of the things that I noticed in the second watching of the series was that he kind of sits back and watches everybody. He's very much an observer, and he does like to stir up trouble, which kind of plays into the Loki idea too. But he's very observant, and I think he has a better idea of where people are psychologically, I guess. He's kind of protective of Magna, and yet at the same time doesn't mind, serving him up as a sacrifice every now and then.
He's pretty opportunistic.
That's very Loki. Very Loki. Yeah.
So I mean, there are so many characteristics, but I gotta say, I'm always a fan of the character that gets the best lines in the show, and that I think that he is one of those. I do. I mean, I agree with all of you in terms of what are the things that you would like to see explained, because we've covered some of the family dynamic and specific individuals. And one of the other things that interests me is that in the very beginning, in one of those, Max, Marx, you mentioned those in the very beginning. There's the introduction talking about what introducing us to some of the mythology. But when they said something about the giants, the giants are actually various types of supernatural creatures. So they may be something other than, they could be something different. And when Magna and Ron are having that the arm wrestling contest, and he's her face, which startles him so much that he loses. He, she's not very attractive. But I was wondering, I'm thinking to myself, well, what kind of a creature is that? So I'm curious if we're going to get a little bit more of an explanation of, that kind of thing too. But for my final question for you guys, what I'm curious about, are there any specific touches or aspects of the show that you particularly liked that seemed really unique to this production? Whether it's a story, a character, just something that they did visually, anything that really, that you just appreciated beyond the story itself. Tina, we'll start with you.
With Marvel being so big, with all of Thor and the Avengers, it was very refreshing to still have a fresh take on Norse mythology that didn't call in, the capes and the jumping and all of that. There wasn't this secret identity. There was this honesty, this brutal honesty of a kid who's trying to find his way. And I think that, as we develop and as we move forward, if we can find ways to try to find our way, try to hone in on who we are and not listen to the naysayers around us, we can be heroes too.
Yeah. There you go. Well, and Magna is always making those notes in his phone, which it really bothered me when he had to surrender that to the counselor. And I thought, the counselor's going to be listening to all these things he's saying. But that didn't get brought up, which was kind of interesting. But he says, that
psychologist was.
Yeah, right. That guy was a pathetic person or whatever. He was a pathetic excuse for a school counselor for sure. But Magna's comment. And I think it's one of the last times he's able to make a note on that phone, is that he says that, for anybody who wants to be special, it's really not all that great. He's finding that he's got all this stuff that he can do that he doesn't know how to explain it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Ellie.
I think one of the reasons, beyond just the subject matter, which was of course going to interest me, I really was fascinated by the way they started with Isolde and kind of made that whole connection with her and Magna. And you really connect with a lot of, her passion. They focus on her quite a bit, of course, in that first episode, and, how she's treated, how she's really trying to do the right thing, even though she's getting a lot of crap for it. She's very much like Tina was saying about, she's trying to be the hero herself, and, be her person. And then we see what happens to her. And I was really surprised that they took somebody who had that strong of a focus in that first episode, and then she's dead.
And then she's gone. Yeah.
So that was one of the first things I think that, I know it's a trope that I've kind of brought in periodically, but not usually in the first episode.
Right. You kill somebody who feels as though they're going to be a major player in the show.
Yeah, usually it takes a couple of episodes to do that.
And as you pointed out too, though, that she was trying to be some kind of a hero. She wasn't trying to be a hero for being a hero's sake, or not for the adulation, but to actually do
the right thing.
The right thing.
And so Magna takes over for her, at that point. Marx.
So for this, I guess there's three things that kind of stand out to me a little bit with it. First is the Norway culture and such. One of the things I love about Netflix and now other streaming platforms is that we're getting introduced to a lot more, non-American, non-Canadian, non-UK productions. That's been a lot of our media. And also because, the Norse mythology is more ingrained in their culture. So it's interesting to see that from a perspective, rather than an outsider trying to explore that culture, to see it explored within the modern day culture. It's cool. It's different. I think also part of that might be why, I like how they change up the story structure a little bit. Like they did kill that character off at the very beginning. That was good. And you don't see that very often in the US. That might have been a mid-season finale or something.
Right. Yeah.
And I liked how, they're patient because they've seeded, with his brother and with Iman and such stuff that we're pretty sure means something, but we don't really know 100%. They didn't. If it was an American production, they would have probably teased it at the very end a little bit more on that. So I think that's a nice nuance to the storytelling, and then also what I think, echoing what some of you already said, is that it's a coming of age story. And we always get the superhero thing where the superheroes are like, I don't want to be special, I want to be normal. And usually it comes up very annoying to me. But in this case, it's sort of like, I don't want to be special because everybody thinks I'm crazy. So now I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's really does. It's not good. So I liked how that different approach was taken in the story too.
Okay. Lisa.
So this kind of goes along with what Mark said. It's very obvious that Magna's on the hero's journey. And at the very beginning, they kind of present him kind of as like the big, dumb muscle guy. Like that sort of comes through. And I was like, oh, am I supposed to be thinking that about the hero? And a lot of times, you're like, because you just don't know yet. And then rather, like a lot of times in these sort of stories, you see like, oh no, he's not the big dumb muscle because here's the magic, here's the wonder. And they didn't do that in this one. It's okay. Here's some powers, and here's some powers, and you know what? People think you're crazy. And here's some more, and no, you don't really have any power. And here's some more, and you still can't do anything. And your friend died. Like I like that they're gradually showing us more about who he is, and it's not like a instant. Here we go, fix all the problems. It's very slow, and frankly, it's kind of torturous. You're like, God, can the guy get a break, like for a second?
Oh yeah.
But he can't. And I like how they're doing this. I like that they didn't just snap and he can just solve the problems and now just fight the bad guys. And he can't. And I like that.
I'm glad they got his hair a little bit different now.
Yes.
And it's good that he was able to lose the glasses, because after all the stuff that he's had to do, he would have been breaking them left and right. Devior.
Yeah, when a hero has real world, when there's real world consequences to what you actually have to fight for or protect. And I think one of the smartest things that the show does is give us villains and a hero that's actually doing something that is tangible, which is fighting for truly the protection of the world through climate change, through corporate takeover, through the destruction of a community. So giving it that element, I think, grounds it and kind of connects us to the characters in a way that is truly fresh and unique. And I think that's the thing that I really appreciate the most about the show.
Well, and talking about real world consequences, this when I made a note of this when I was watching the finale. There's when Magna's he's waking up from a dream, and they show him when he wakes up, and he's actually got a little bit of drool on the side of his lip. And I thought, well, that's so true. I mean, we all wake up like that. Hopefully I'm not shocking anybody by that saying that. But I mean, that happens to everybody. And just the fact that they acknowledge it wasn't like it was all over his face. It wasn't like, it wasn't gross. But I just thought, they do a really good job at, not just real world consequences, but of just grounding the show. And this is what this beautiful yet very gritty town looks like. And it's like when Lawrence is giving the speech as Ron at the Constitution Day, I think is what it was called, the festival, and he said, "Well, who are going to be the people left after all the ice melts? Those of us at the top of the hill." So that kind of gives you another picture of, yes, literally they live on top of the hill. So they do a lot of things like that where they remind you that, oh yeah.
Also, I kind of wanted to chime in about the house, actually, because if you know anything about Norse culture or Norwegian culture, that's an old stave church that has been converted into a house. So here you're using essentially the churches are where the Utens live, which I think is another whole interesting kind of metaphor on that. Right. So, because a lot of those churches have a pagan basis that were converted to Christian churches. Yep. So that's another whole side of that too.
Right. And they do like being worshiped. So for them, they probably figured turnabout was fair play. Right. So, Yeah, that was well, and I know we could probably go on forever, and but I really appreciate everybody being willing to come and talk about this show today, and well, at any time. And again, it's something we would have covered at con if if we had been there in person. And what we can hope is that season 2 may be out before Dragon Con 2021. And I can promise, I'm here to, you guys can hold me to it, that if the show does come out prior to Con 2021, we will have, whatever format Dragon Con happens to be in this year, we will talk about Ragnarok during Dragon Con this year. So, and I would love to have all of you back if you are willing to come.
Definitely.
Do it. So, in any case, I want to thank all of you. It's been a pleasure to spend some time here on a Sunday afternoon with you and talk about this very cool show that I know we were all hoping will come back soon.
Yes,
so we can see what happens next. For those of you that follow us either on the YouTube channel or on our Facebook page, who pay attention to our track programming, we do have coming up also next week on 16th, I will have a multi-author panel rather than a single author interview this month. We're doing a Meet the Authors panel featuring some folks that I did not get to use during Dragon Con proper this year. And we'll be doing that. And then on the 22nd, we will have our very first installment of Supernatural Rewind, where we will discuss season one of Supernatural.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, we're going back to the beginning, and
she's insane.
I know. I probably am. Yes.
No, this is great. I think that's great.
It'll be fun. I hope people will come and join us. So, in any case, I want to thank you all very much for being here today. And thank all of our viewers, whether they were watching us live or whether they will watch us later on. But thanks very much, everyone, and have a great rest of your Sunday afternoon. Goodbye.
Thanks, Carol.
Bye.
Thanks, Carol.
Take care.